For some pony made of fire, I've never met a heart so cold.
You know that feeling when you love a piece of media so much, only to see it relentlessly bashed to death by people around you for no reason whatsoever, and you're the only one out of everyone who feels sane? Well, that's me. And if you guys don't mind, I want to open up with a simple question. You've seen so many people call My Little Pony Make Your Mark a failure, that it suffered from bad writing, that it wasted the setup that a new generation gave it. Well, what if I told you that what you've been hearing about the show isn't true at all? Dare I say it, what if I told you that Make Your Mark was actually an overhated masterpiece? Hello everypony, my name is Hawk Nightwing, the most unapologetic Defender G5 you'll ever meet, and if you've watched me for as long as you have, you know that I love Make Your Mark. I say that while it started off a bit rocky, it turned out in the end to be a mostly rich, layered, and fresh series that took risks and dared to be its own thing. I say that it even turned out to surpass Friendship's Magic in terms of quality by the time it concluded. You might have heard me praise its unique structure, deep and complex character writing, how many episodes flow seamlessly to the next, the lore, everything about it. And today, after seeing so many people rip this show to shreds for months, burn it to the ground, and dance on its ashes like it was no SpongeBob Day, only no SpongeBob Day was made a daily routine for the fandom, I want to see if I can uncover the truth. I want to prove that this show not only had fantastic writing and excellent character building, but that it's pretty underrated. As someone who watched this show to the very end, every single episode and stuck through it, I want to offer my own perspective and see if I can change your minds on how you view this show and what it accomplished. 2024 seems to be the year of G5 retrospectives, and this is mine. As an aspiring author, tackling this show from a writer's perspective and proving why it worked from that angle has been something I've always wanted to do. It's all been building up to this. But to do that, we're going to need to go in deep. Way deep. And to do that, we definitely need more than one video. That's right, I'll be making 2 videos analyzing what Make Your Mark did right, essentially separating it into 2 eras, that being the setup era and the payoff era. The setup era covers chapters 1 through 3, where everything is being established and set up, and the payoff era is chapters 4 through 6, where the story and character writing shoots through the roof, and everything set up gets a satisfying payoff. This video will be covering that setup era, which I believe to be the most hated out of the entire show's run, and I will show you just how great this series really was, even in its early days. I'll be reviewing and analyzing every single episode, and our adventure all starts with the special that kickstarted it all. I feel like I have the most on and off relationship when it comes to this special that kickstarted the whole Make Your Mark series. On one hoof, this special led me to creating 2 successful stories on fanfiction about Zip, so there was a lot of potential in mind just from this alone. But on the other hoof, there were a couple glaring problems that prevented from reaching the highs of later episodes. Yes, the subplot of Zip's friends not believing her about the Unity Crystals glitching is absolutely dumb. Yes, the third act resolution essentially undercuts the whole friendship by choice aspect that I praise the new generation for. Yes, Opal looks absolutely hideous in her first appearance, and I still can't imagine actual animators saying that the shadowy color palette was ever a good idea with the limited budget they had.
Here's Johnny!
And yes, the animation is certainly not the best. Not bad, but it could be improved on. But despite all this, I like to say with absolute confidence that relationship is very much on right now. How can this be? Well, I still can't help but find a lot of redeeming qualities in this special, particularly in regard to the smart setup for the overall story, and literally anything going on with Zip. It tackles strong themes of self-identity, belonging, and finding your purpose, all of which are ideas which will become integral to the show at large. And Posey was a great starting antagonist in my eyes, but we'll get to that soon. Now, the first critique of the special I do want to touch on was actually highlighted in LP Fever's review, where she says that in order for the story to work, the writers expect you to have watched Tell Your Tale beforehand. And I personally don't get this.
The film seems to have expected you to watch the Tell Your Tale shorts on YouTube, but in my opinion, that is just not the way forward for a show like this. If you have to have watched those to know why the characters are where they are, that's not good writing.
I think what she means by this is that the Crystal Bright House is already fully built and functional by this episode, in which case, of course it would be. It's a bit jarring, sure, if you don't watch Tell Your Tale and you just came right out of the movie, but it's not problematic. The story for Chapter 1 works fine in its own right, and it doesn't outright reference things that happen in the first few episodes of Tell Your Tale. It's not outright asking viewers to watch Tell Your Tale to understand things. If you watched it, great. You'll have a bit better understanding of the story. But if you haven't, that's fine too. Just accept that after Sunny's lighthouse was destroyed, she now has a new house for she and her friends to live in, which was the obvious next step for the overarching narrative anyway. I personally believe that it makes sense to see that Sunny now has a new place to live. I mean, where else is the story going to go from there? There has to be a place for the Unity Crystals to be stored after they were put back together. As I said, the special is not really telling you to watch Tell Your Tale, as it was around this point in time where both shows were relatively self-contained when setting stuff up. Moving on from that, something else I do have to give this special credit for is the pacing. Some say it's too slow, but that slow pacing actually works because all the time is spent developing the characters' individual arcs. The point is to get to know the characters directly following the movie. What are they doing now? And the special actually managed to balance itself quite nicely with each storyline. We have Posey and the other Earth ponies growing disillusionment with magic, the crystals glitching, Zip's detective work, Izzy and Pip unicycling the lantern for Sunny, Zip being torn between her destiny and what she wants to do, so on and so forth. That may seem like a lot of plot lines, and it is, but what I find truly remarkable is how the episode juggles them all perfectly and how they all come together in the end. Essentially, Zip's arc has a really good payoff at the end of the story when she tells her mother that she wants to stay in Maritime Bay, as that's where she feels like she belongs. Her arc is all about self-identity and feeling like you're serving a purpose, which is actually illustrated by this great scene on the balcony.
But I'm not sure if I fit in here either.
Of course you do!
Even if all I do is fly around and try out new moves?
It's what you love to do! As Izzy would say, it makes your sparkle shine really bright.
She wants to feel useful and explore who she is as a pony, without being bogged down by royal responsibilities. And in the end, she gets what she wants. Is it a bit predictable? Sure, but we don't really watch MLP for twists and turns, let's not kid ourselves here. Izzy's plotline culminates when she gives the repair lantern to Sunny, which actually sets up an interesting subplot for her in regards to her creative instincts that's further explored in the first episode of Chapter 2. It's this plotline that gives her and Pip an absolutely wonderful dynamic that's, again, explored in Chapter 2 to a greater degree. Speaking of Pip, she finally gets to perform her song at the end, although we don't get to see it because I guess that darn 45-minute time limit constrains everything. And Sunny's arc for the most part culminates when she gets her alicorn power under control and saves Wendy and Posey when they fall into one of the gaping holes. Everything just comes together very smoothly, and to that end, the script and the structure is something to be admired. Every pony is in character from how they were portrayed previously, giving Zip a more central role as a detective, added greater dimensions to her character. The only downside I have to say to all this is that Sunny was unfortunately sidelined and was mostly in the background, only getting to shine in the climax. And that is something I take issue with, though the saving grace for me is that she's just as earnest as always, wanting to show Posey that magic can be a good thing. She's unsure of herself, but doesn't hesitate to do the right thing when it matters most. This still is the Sunny we know and love from before, and for what she was given to do in the special, it works. I can see why someone would be quick to write off this whole special once they find out Sunny wasn't 100% in the spotlight, but there still was stuff for her to do, and the payoff to the small arc she was given was enough to satisfy me. Now let's talk about Posey and why she makes for a compelling one-time antagonist, as well as how her plotline ties to one of the core thematic ideas of the special. Posey works the way she does because, again, like Sprout, she is a reflection of the town and what they are becoming. What strikes me as one of G5's many strong points is that its antagonists have a direct connection to the universe in a way that FIM's antagonists hardly did. Posey may be seen as a ripoff of Sprout, but I'd argue that she and Sprout are so much more than that. They exist as not only foils to the main characters, but as direct mirrors to the status quo. G5 has a special attention to detail when it comes to its antagonist, and when it presents one, it makes that antagonist a product of the environment they grew up in. The reason why Posey doesn't need extra development as a character here is because she already has all the development she needs. It's not explicitly stated, but implied. You know exactly why she would be so angry at the unicorns and Pegasi due to the status quo that exists, and the special doesn't need to give her an expressly stated motivation. It trusts the audience to figure that out for themselves. Posey is in a way a tragic figure here, in the same vein as Sprout. Both ponies act the way they do because of the climate they were raised in. Because no pony had magic for what seems like years, you can imagine how furious it would make Posey that once it did return, Earth ponies like her weren't given that magic. It's the classic case of feeling left out because everyone else has something you don't. Her entire shtick is that she resists change and integration because she isn't comfortable with magic being so unpredictable, which is a plot thread that is carried into Chapter 2. You can imagine how more open she would be if the ponies were never divided. She hates what she doesn't understand, which is a theme I can honestly relate to as a massive Snyder fan.
People are afraid of what they don't understand.
The lesson she learns is that change is good, and that she took things way too far. Sometimes jealousy can drive us to do things we definitely regret later. That is the case with Posey. She has to open herself up to the unicorns and Pegasi, and embrace the positive change brought to her community. And the way she's reformed actually makes sense, as the near-death experience she went through due to her own prejudice taught her a valuable lesson about not blaming others for her problems, and she sounds like she's genuinely apologetic by the end. She starts off as angry and spiteful, and through seeing how her actions almost caused the death of her and every pony around her, she realizes that trying to blame the unicorns and Pegasi for being superior in magic isn't right. The third act is where things get a bit wonky. Everything flows relatively smoothly and comes together really well, until we get to the breaking point of the crystals. Like I said, while the climax does work for the little arc Sunny had throughout the special, It does unfortunately retcon the beautiful ending of a new generation by having the ponies essentially being forced to work together. I wouldn't exactly call them dystopian by any means, as later episodes of the show demonstrate that they absolutely do not act up over a simple argument. But it is a step down in quality from having the ponies decide for themselves in the movie. But that's actually nothing compared to the fact that people are quick to dismiss the concept of Earth Pony magic altogether as a concept in the era with FIM. And while that is true, I actually welcome this evolution to their abilities. In G4, it was never really explicitly defined what magic enabled Earth Ponies to do what they did. In contrast to the Unicorns and Pegasi, who all had the abilities of arcane spells and flight respectively, it was never clear just what Earth Ponies could do. This makes more sense on a conceptual level, and coming off of what Twilight says later in Chapter 2 about a question of magic evolving, I am more than willing to accept this because it gives them an important role in the story. And so the special ends with Sparky being hatched from the egg that Hitch found earlier at the beach, more on our favorite baby dragons soon, and the promise of all our burning questions someday being answered. Overall, Make Your Mark Chapter 1, or just Make Your Mark, is a flawed but very enjoyable start to this amazing show. It's definitely not perfect, not by a long shot, but this episode clearly showed that even right from the beginning, this series was not afraid to tell a new type of story, and that great things were to come for G5 as a whole. The things it gets right, it really gets right, and that's the kind of attitude I choose to have with this. As I said, I've had an on and off relationship with this special, but in the end, I love it. It's got a ton of heart and emotion, tackles great themes, it has intrigue and tension, and it builds on the foundations that a new generation set up, by tackling the return of magic in a realistic manner. There's a ton to love here, and it acts as a worthy pilot to make your mark. Now we're moving on to the good stuff. The good to phenomenal episodes of Chapter 2, which is the main topic of this video and why I decided to make it. If the first special had some problems holding it back from being a true home run, then be prepared because I have nothing but praise for the next episodes in this batch. This is where the show really piqued my interest and made me a hardcore defender of this generation. Before I was intrigued, but not completely on board yet. But this chapter sold me. What sort of brilliant masterpiece can be waiting for us at the end of the tunnel? Well, let's find out. Now, I know that a lot of people wish that this episode came after the next one, because compared to the brilliant character study for Hitch that is Growing Pains, this episode is more down to earth in comparison, and I for one find that very refreshing. We have to remember at the core of G4 was the relationship between the characters and the situations they find themselves in, so it makes sense that the first episode of this show would be a simple slice of life story, and having it focus on Izzy's creative side really works and provides some depth to her. We already know that she's a really talented artist and crafter, and that brings her a lot of joy. When we think of Izzy, we often associate her with her boundless passion for arts and crafts, but what happens when too much is demanded of her and she starts getting creative burnout as she can't keep up with the demand? That's what I found very intriguing, and it's juxtaposed with Pip also having creative burnout with her music. The bond they share here is genuinely great, and I love how the advice they gave each other pays off in the end. From doing my research, I found that the biggest point of contention among fans is the resolution of this episode and the lesson. We can look to two sources to prove this point. In his video discussing how the series is supposedly ruining a whole generation of kids, dear Luna, what is with these clickbaity titles? Harpo Holmes had this to say about the message.
Or in Pip's case, she realises that if you can't come up with new musical hits, she should just slightly remix her old ones and print double money for every single song. Great idea, Netflix. Make sure to instill that derivative, lazy, modern media mindset into the corporate executives of tomorrow. Because who needs new ideas when you can just constantly reuse existing ones? I mean, that's pretty much the entire premise of the show already.
Yeah, spoiler alert, that's not the message at all. It's taking inspiration from yourself and how if you're stuck, you should use what you currently have to make something new. When Izzy comes in with a mixtape song and plays it, it's supposed to signify that she was inspired from it and turned it into something new. Just because Pip doesn't come up with a new song doesn't mean it's hammering home an unoriginal message. What the episode is actually trying to say is don't feel pressured into constantly having to provide for others on a daily basis when you don't have anything, as that just ruins the fun. You should create things because you want to, not because someone is demanding it of you. Pip's song being transformed into a remix proves that inspiration can come from the most unlikely of sources, and the difference between the original remix version is significant enough to call it a new song on its own. I'm not going to say that's the best way to execute that lesson, but I think we could have had Izzy telling Pip this thing about what speaks to her on a personal level, and resolve the plot point that way. But it works the way it does because it shows that you don't have to be beholden to demands when it comes to artistic inspiration, because that comes from within. When you demand too much of a person to create so much of this product, you can dilute their passion and inspiration for it. The pressure can build up until it's just not fun anymore. The message of this episode is not don't be original and print double money with the same product. It's taking inspiration from the most unlikely of sources and creating things because you want to. Ultimately, what kids should take away from this episode is passion and creativity comes from within, and if you can't continue to produce this type of product, then stop and think of what else that inspires you. It's a valuable lesson for kids to learn, especially in the ever-growing supply and demand market that we have. It can be hard to keep up, so sometimes the solution is just to step back and re-examine why you fell in love with creating in the first place. And that segues us to the other big criticism, the resolution. In his review for Chapter 2, Starstrike claimed that
Wait, I hear you saying. What's the resolution to this story? Well, you see, I'm having trouble figuring that out myself. In fact, I wouldn't even say there is one, because it ends with Izzy unicycling one of Pip's old songs. How does she do this? Literally just by playing her song on her phone and placing it on a cart, along with what looks like a plastic record player and a bobblehead. Pip then starts singing the song, Izzy never makes those hair accessories every pony wanted. Episode over. Like, I was genuinely surprised when the credits started rolling because I didn't think that the conflict in the episode was resolved.
Which isn't true. The episode does have a resolution. The reason why it doesn't resolve Izzy's situation when creating the bracelets was because that's not what the central conflict was. If that part was resolved, it would have betrayed the message because it would have shown that the townsfolk would just get what they want. You could say that Izzy could have told the townsponies that she didn't want to make anymore, but that's A, not how this works, sorry to tell you, as customers will continue to demand stuff from you even if it ends up sending you to a mental institution, and 2, would have been the expected route to go. The episode actually subverts expectations by having the focus actually be on Pip and Izzy mentoring each other, and how through their shared advice, Izzy realizes that she needs a bigger space to unleash her wild imagination. Pip gets inspired by seeing a remix of one of her old songs. We don't get the resolution to the growing demand, because that was never the focus of the episode. It was the means to provide the inner conflict, the obstacle, within Izzy. And it's not solved through external means, but internal means. We're not supposed to care if the ponies get what they want or not. We are instead supposed to care if Izzy finds her inspiration, and if Pip finds hers. Pip acts as a sort of guiding figure throughout the story, trying to inspire Izzy to be her best self. That's her role, and it's what gives her agency throughout the main conflict. And I like how it's explicitly highlighted that not even she has all the answers. At first you'd think with all the advice she gives that she'll be the guiding figure and nothing more. But the moment Izzy leaves, you immediately start to see the cracks in that facade, and you realize Pip is just as scared as Izzy is. Usually you expect a person giving the advice in media or literature to know everything and to do no wrong. But what the writers did that smartly subverts this trope is that they gave Pip her own arc about coming up with new music after coming down with creative block. She's so focused to make sure Izzy solves her problem that she completely neglects her own problems. She puts others before herself, and it's up to Izzy to save the day in the end. Pip is just as fallible as every pony else despite being a mentor in this story, and she worries that she gave bad advice. Not only that, but it was her advertising the hairpin that Izzy gave Sunny at the fair that inwardly kickstarted the whole conflict to begin with. And you watch her grapple with the fallout of her mistake throughout the whole episode. She has her own thing going on with her, and watching her deal with the fears of not being able to provide for her fans is uniquely of tackling the social media influencer part of her character. Gone is the pompous and arrogant mask she put up in the movie, and beneath it is a Pegasus with actual self-doubt. Already, this is a completely new and different take on Pip in the way she was portrayed before, and it's great to see this new side to her that makes her feel like an actual pony. I mean, she does get way better from here on out, but you know, I gotta compliment the way the staff portrayed her here. Both Pip and Izzy are the protagonists of this episode, and their dynamic is the key to the resolution at the end. The reason why this works so well is because the situations that Pip and Izzy get into build off each other in smart ways. The episode is about them primarily. We are introduced for Opaline and Misty for a bit, and I thank Luna that they fixed the lighting on her because now she actually looks good. Their roles aren't significant, but they don't have to be, because this is not their episode. We'll have plenty of time to see Misty develop as a character later on, but this scene mainly exists to set the stage for later events. The episode is concise and simple. It knows what it wants to be, and it really feels like Make Your Mark has found its identity after the first special. A lot of gripes people first had with the series with the first special feels like it has been rectified right off the bat. But of course they're gonna complain anyway, because of course they would. Remember what I said in the beginning of this video about bronies going with preconceived notions about G5? Yeah, this is gonna come up a lot. Don't worry about them though, I'm just here to debunk their arguments. On to the next episode. Now we're talking. If people were complaining about Izzy does it for being tame and lacking a resolution, then Growing Pains fixes that and then some, by putting the Earth Pony Magic subplot at the forefront of the conflict. And I will say this episode handles the Earth Pony Magic better than the first special did. It's also a full-on character study for Hitch Trailblazer, and feels in a lot of ways a sequel to the movie. A lot of people have complained in the special that Hitch has turned into this sort of joke character, if you will. That his hard edge from the movie is gone, and that makes him dumb for the sake of being dumb, I guess?
That has all been completely removed, as now he just whines and complains and acts as a complete idiot. Hell, in one episode, he actually tries to get rid of magic. You know, the thing he helped restore in the first place?
Stupid!
Hitch doesn't even act as a sheriff anymore. Yeah, they say he is, but Zip does his job more than he does. As Hitch has been sidelined to take care of a character so garbage that it makes me wish Flurryheart and Grubber would come back from the dead to kick his ass.
Look how they massacred my boy.
But I'd argue that that is a pretty false statement if I do say so myself. Of course, Hitch would be more lighthearted nowadays since Earth Ponies, Unicorns, and Pegasi are now friends, and life isn't as stressful as it used to be in Maritime Bay. Despite still having a lot of weight on his shoulders, I'd argue that Hitch now has a lot less. He can now be more carefree since Maritime Bay isn't ruled by fear anymore. If you all remember from the movie, the town always lives in constant fear for what they didn't understand, so any levity was particularly fleeting and hard to come by. You rarely saw any joy from the ponies then, so that translated tenfold to Hitch as the pony in charge of protecting them. But now that all the ponies live in harmony again, he can let loose more often and show off other sides of his personality other than the straight man archetype. But just because harmony has been largely restored, does not mean Hitch is completely immune to falling back to his old ways. That strict and irrational side of him can still come out, and it definitely does here. When his town is threatened, you can bet that Hitch is going to step up and do whatever it takes to restore order. Earth pony magic is still an anomaly in Maritime Bay, and most don't understand it, so it makes sense here that Hitch would go so far as to outlaw it. He definitely still lets his paranoia drive him sometimes, and we have to remember this was the climate he grew up in. Being scared and prepared is all he knows how to do, and he is prone to jumping to conclusions and making rash decisions in times of crises. I find that most people seem to misconstrue the message of this one. They try and use this and the Sparky subplot, which we'll get into in a second, as evidence to say that this episode is trying to paint Hitch as in the wrong for wanting to regulate magic.
The episode paints him like he's some sort of villain who wants everyone catalogued and treats him like Sprout the dictator, so he can know how they can deal with its downsides and keep people safe. Zip even tells him off saying, and I quote, "It's too early to know if Earth pony magic is anything to worry about." Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how we ended up with lead in toys and asbestos and building materials, because God forbid you try to regulate new science or technology in order to explore the short and long-term effects.
No, it isn't. What the episode is warning against is too much control to the point of outright irrationality, and this is hammered home with the subplot of Izzy babysitting Sparky, who I honestly find to be a really interesting character. I really don't get the hate for him. But that's a topic for later episodes. What I find most compelling is that the episode isn't trying to paint authority figures as in the wrong, but it's asking them to strike a middle ground instead. Izzy being the polar opposite of Hitch would have a completely different perspective on what it's like to parent a kid. But Izzy isn't being irresponsible here. The reason why she lets Sparky run free and do what he wants is because sometimes that's what a growing child needs. You can't always be strict with them, as that robs them of their childhood, but you also can't be too hands-off or, well, just look at a lot of our generation now. Izzy gives Sparky the right amount of doting, but she also knows how to get him to behave, as demonstrated by this short little moment.
Izzy has to pop out real quick, but if you're good while I'm gone, unicycle your very own racetrack.
Hitch learns from her that he can't be in control of everything. There are some things you can control, but there are also other things you have to let people figure out on their own. When Hitch attempts to take the Earth Pony crystal out of the Prisbeam, it is out of sheer desperation. Sunny tries to talk him out of jumping to conclusions earlier, but when he has something on his mind, you know that Hitch is going to do it. Only, he doesn't. And some have cited this as abrupt and contrived resolution, but it really isn't. Hear me out. Hitch may be stubborn, paranoid, and strong-willed, but the one thing he isn't is irresponsible. As he reaches out with his hoof to do this, his senses come back to him. This works because first and foremost, Hitch Trailblazer is a sheriff, and he knows that if he does this, then he will be putting every pony at risk. That is what this episode calls out. Earth pony magic is wild and untamed, but that doesn't make it bad. For all of its pitfalls, it is a necessity, and trying to take that away is absolute madness. Strange and unpredictable does not equal bad. Does this sound familiar to all of you yet? That's because this episode is, for all intents and purposes, an extension of A New Generation. The standalone sequel, if you will. Here we have Hitch once again grappling with a prospect outside of his control, and we have to see him learn a valuable lesson from it. Through this experience, Hitch learns to control his instincts and when to pull back. He needs to let the citizens figure out magic for themselves and harness it on their own. The point of this episode isn't, you can do whatever you want and you'll be fine. No, the moral is, you should learn when to step in and be strict, but also when to pull back, and let whoever you're teaching figure out the answer for themselves. I'd argue that the writing in this episode is more geared towards parents than children, as they would get the moral much more than kids would, and it reinforces that this generation is geared towards all ages, just like FIM before it. And of course, you do have the Twilight Sparkle cameo, which outright broke the fandom. I am not kidding. People were raging at this, calling it an example of G5 latching on the G4 to tell its story. As I established earlier, it is only one scene to set up the opening plotline. How else do you think we should have gotten introduced to our main villain, who is an alicorn? You guys are acting like she appears in every single episode to tell the main five something. If you're seeing this, magic is now more powerful than it's ever been, and Earth Pony magic has been activated for the first time in the history of Equestria. Opaline has sent one of her merciless minions to extract an ocean lily. You must find her before she does, or she'll destroy all of Equestria. Beware of your alicorn magic, Sunny. There are evil forces out there who will want to exploit it. Once a student mind tried to steal all the cutie marks from an entire village, and almost destroyed Equestria along with it. Your cutie marks possess the most potent magic in all of the land. Do not lose sight of who you are. Your lantern has been stolen. You must find it now before it's too late. Rawr! Protect my grandson, or I will eat all of you. Twat! What are you doing, Applejack? Even though I personally wouldn't have put Twilight in there if I was the showrunner, as I think that ended up being more detrimental to G5's already shaky reputation in the mainstream fandom eyes and helpful in the long run, I respect the reasoning for it. Yes, she turned out to be obvious marketing bait, but if you take a look at the same beyond the simple narrative, rawr, nostalgia bait bad, G5 bad, then you'll understand why this scene needed to be in here. From a storytelling perspective, Twilight's hologram exists to set up the overarching history of the opening plotline. Remember what I said earlier? The comics are unfortunately not canon, so anything they said about the backstory of G5 has to be thrown out the window. This is an entirely different explanation since we're not getting the comics as our baseline, so therefore, this scene is required. Contrary to what you hear from most people, Twilight's cameo actually proves an eager willingness on the part of the show staff to set up the overarching narrative and answer questions. By doing this, they are already implying that she and Twilight have some history together, which in turn creates intrigue. I mean, the fact that everyone had tons of questions after the scene took place doesn't prove bad writing, but that the writers did their job. You're supposed to be left with tons of questions afterwards, and we're not going to get the answers right away. Similar to how FIM set up tons of mysteries with its world with each new piece of lore, and with each new season, some questions got answered, Make Your Mark is going for the same approach. You can't tell me with a straight face that you at least didn't have fun theorizing in your head or out loud, as what this might mean. Even if I was to agree, which I don't by any means, that the scene introduced more questions than answered, and that's somehow a bad thing, what does that even prove? Did G5 is relying on G4 too much to tell its story? Clearly Hasbro wanted to include Twilight for marketing, let's not deny that, but can we at least appreciate that this even works story-wise? Just look at our modern day climate where cameos only exist as nostalgia bait and nothing else. To have a callback / cameo work within the confines of a story's narrative reflects a level of care that only Spider-Man No Way Home can pull off, but barely. If we're talking objective storytelling quality, then this scene is a godsend by comparison, because not only does it exist to tingle the nostalgic parts of our brain on a surface level, but it also exists to set up the overarching narrative of the show and tie our main villain to that narrative. We have to get this cameo in order for the rest of the story to work. As a sequel to a previous story, you have to sometimes reference what came before, even if you want your new story to stand on its own, because if we don't have that bridge, then the story doesn't work. Make Your Mark avoids a pitfall that many legacy sequels tend to fall into, such as the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where they want to stand on their own, but they also rely too much on the old characters, and not enough trust is put into the new ones. They usually have the legacy characters be still alive in order to ruin them, or spit on their legacy, like Luke Skywalker, or having Rey take over the Skywalker name even when she had no reason to do that at all. Heck, even Season 9 of FIM itself, the self-proclaimed modern classic, fell victim to that same classic legacy sequel trope, where not enough time is spent building up the new characters such as the Young Six in their own right, and instead all the time is spent having the legacy characters relearn lessons they already learned many seasons prior. As a result, the Young Six felt underdeveloped and undervalued by the narrative, and worst of all, they were sidelined because the writing staff didn't trust them to carry their own season. Sure, they had some focus, but the one thing I would agree with Dave Magenta on was that there wasn't enough focus. This is like their own show squeezed into the main one, and it was not done justice. The School of Friendship was barely a thing, so it makes you as a viewer question why it was even introduced to begin with, only to be background fodder. G5 isn't any of those things. Even when it's repeating lessons from FIM, it tells them in a completely different way. These repeats feel organic, because not only is this a new continuity with new characters, and the way MLP teaches friendship is pretty basic, but that it trusts these new characters to learn these lessons by themselves. There are no old characters left alive in G5's time frame. All the main six have passed on. There is no way they can be ruined, and as I already established before, having the pony split doesn't destroy Twilight's arc, because FIM's story ended with the Golden Age of Harmony. Just because this is where the timeline eventually ends up doesn't make everything Twilight did pointless. Unlike the sequel trilogy, where all 9 films constituted the same Skywalker saga story, and the legacy characters were still alive to be ruined, this is effectively a new generation. Just because it takes place in the same world doesn't make it a retcon of the previous generation. Because that previous generation ended with Twilight and her friends in the best places in their lives, having achieved everything they set out to do. And I want you to put this in the context of our real-world history. Is the fact that the Roman Empire fell make Octavius Augustus a failed world leader? Is the fact that the ideal America that George Washington built resulted in people being even more divided today than ever make Hamlin and the revolutionaries a failure? Or Abraham Lincoln because racism and prejudice against African Americans still exists? Martin Luther King Jr. with the Civil Rights Movement? Is the fact that certain successful events in history were effectively undone in the modern day rendered those historical figures failures in their own lives? I want you to think about this and write your answers in the comments below. There's also the supposed continuity error that supposedly occurs in this episode, as Twilight isn't in her The Last Problem form. Now, putting aside the obvious fact that normal Twilight would have been easier to render into 3D machine than Purple Celestia, and is generally more recognizable to longtime fans, the fact that Twilight was not in her The Last Problem form wasn't even the fault of the creative team. I'm recording this section a little late, but I actually got this comment from user Central Labino Sem Onote? I totally butchered that, I'm so sorry. Who said that apparently Jillian Barrow, who was Mickey Mark's showrunner, wanted Twilight to still be in that form to maintain continuity, but the higher-ups at Hasbro wouldn't let her. So it was an executive decision, not a creative one. So the fact that she looked different here was not a creative oversight in the slightest. They actually thought about that, which shows how they care about the continuity of the generations. But in a way, I can kinda understand the reasoning here, as like I said, Twilight's normal look is a lot more recognizable to fans. Plus, there was a lot of backlash to her new design essentially being a Celestia recolor anyway. Yeah, it was not Lauren Faust's original sketch and vision, but there's no way that Alucard can get that tall in just 10 years. Luda didn't get that tall in 1,000 years. Cadence never got that tall. For all the protectiveness that fans seem to get over that scene, they forget that Twilight's entire look in the last problem is a continuity error that doesn't line up at all from an universe perspective. If anything, this is a Make Your Mark team fixing that error. And it does kind of get me mad that people are focusing more on the fact that Twilight appears, rather than thinking about why she appeared. Starstrike decried the fact that Twilight stored the magic in the crystals, as the staff apparently giving her the same motivations as the villain she fought?
She then explains that she put all of the magic in Equestria in these crystals in order to keep Opaline from stealing the magic. Yes, it is the same motivation they gave the T-Rex and the Storm King because the show is incredibly uninspired and not unique in any way.
Disregarding the backstory hints we get later on in the series, let's just focus on the little breadcrumbs we receive from Twiggy herself here. It's incredibly disingenuous for him to automatically assume the worst behind the writing here. Like I established, this scene exists to set up the Mystery Opaline plotline, and it's meant to be followed up upon with more breadcrumbs and clues. So without any clues whatsoever, Starstrike is effectively saying that Twilight was in the wrong for storing the magic in the crystals, because Opaline tried to steal the magic, effectively dismissing it outright as bad writing. And I don't like how quick he is to dismiss this plot thread as the writers ruining Twilight's character, especially when this is the first indication we've ever gotten of Twilight's involvement at all. It'd be one thing if we were given context in this episode, but we're not. This is the first time we're hearing about this, the first clue to the overall mystery. And he's already keen to dismiss this whole plot thread right out of the gate. Look, I don't want to make it seem like I'm demeaning Starstrike as an analyst or a content creator. If he doesn't like the episode or the scene in particular, that's completely fine. He's welcome to have valid reasons for not liking the fact that Twilight was just inserted in here. I want to be as respectful as I can, but there's just nothing I can say to defend this argument, so apologies in advance if I get a little angry at this claim that Twilight is just like her villains, just because he had to make a difficult choice to protect Equestria. The main problem I have with him saying that the writers gave Twilight the same motivations as the villain she fought is because it's demeaning the difficult choice that Twilight had to make. It's like saying that Celestia was in the wrong for banishing Nightmare Moon, completely ignoring the context behind the decision when Luna's Nightmare Moon was about to subject the ponies to eternal night. She made that choice because there was no option left, not because she was the villain, and the same goes with Twilight here. I know the fandom had the whole to the moon in-joke whenever Celestia did anything, my point is exactly that. It was treated with levity and lightheartedness, with jokes about it. But imagine if Sunbelt was the main protagonist of G4, meaning we follow the adventures of she and Luna, and then in G5, we meet Twilight and the gang and find out Celestia did this. I don't think we'd be making jokes out of this now, would we? It's because the fandom never got attached to Celestia the same way they did Twilight that they can make jokes about it, whereas with Twilight they can't. The whole reason why people are complaining about Twilight doing any of this isn't down to bad writing. No, it all comes down to nostalgia blindness. It's incredibly hard for these people to see Twilight doing this because they only know Twilight the flawless protagonist, and not Twilight the ruler of Equestria. When you have the entire kingdom resting on your shoulders, you have to make decisions that you wouldn't normally make. Caring for others comes with greater responsibilities. You can't just go out on a limb, fight, and expect to win that easily. I want to read a quote from James Cameron to lead up to Avatar: The Way of Water, one of my now favorite films of all time in recent memory. He was comparing the character development of the heroes in the MCU movies versus Jake and Neytiri's development from the first Avatar to the sequel. Quote, Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington now play parents, 15 years late. In the first movie, Sam's character leaps off this flying creature and essentially changes the course of history as a result of this crazy, almost suicidal leap of faith, and Zoe's character leaps off a limb and assumes there's going to be some nice, big leaves down there that can cushion her fall. But when you're a parent, you don't think that way. So for me, as a parent of 5 kids, I'm saying, what happens when those characters mature and realize they have a responsibility outside of their own survival? When I look at these big, spectacular films, looking at you, Marvel and DC, it doesn't matter how old the characters are. They all act like they're in college. They have relationships, but they really don't. They never hang up their spurs because of their kids. The things that really ground us and give us power, love, and a purpose, those characters don't experience it. I think that's not the way to make movies. You may be scratching your head right now wondering what this quote has to do with anything, and you'd be right to ask that. So, let me try and explain the best way I can. While these are different topics, family and rulership, they do have a lot of overlap, simply due to the fact of the additional responsibility that the person ruling the kingdom has. Ruling over a kingdom means you have to take care of your subjects, and that comes with additional responsibilities, similar to running a family. Twilight had to put the safety of Equestria first, and she can't be out risking her life the way she used to, simply due to the fact that she's the ruler of an entire kingdom. She has no line of succession at this point, she has to make sure she's alive to see peace restored to the land. Add to that, the fact that Twilight actually won against Opaline. And yeah, I'd like to point out this fundamental misunderstanding as well. Twilight never failed to defeat Opaline. As established by this episode and the traditional unicorn sleepover, Twilight actually won. She just couldn't prevent the ponytails from separating, which as we established makes sense. I'll get into this more soon, so make note of this for later. Also, one thing I want to mention before I forget is the ending of the episode. The resolution with the main five growing that tree to stop the rampaging berry was interesting, especially considering Sparky seems to have some sort of connection to it. It almost seems like this moment is foreshadowing a big piece of lore to be revealed later on in the series. It's like the staff had a plan all along or something. Nah, that can't possibly be it, right? They had this story planned out from the very start, and it just adds to the rewatch value of this show. Next episode. Now this episode is just brilliant in so many ways. I know everyone has said it already and it's true. Portrait for a Princess is the absolute best episode of Make Your Mark so far. It's the greatest episode not only for that god tier song at the end, but because at its core is a conflict that I'm sure most of us get into in our lives. Sibling estrangement. I know everyone has already talked about this, so I'll try and keep this brief. I don't have siblings myself, but I know people that do, and I've watched a lot of media involving siblings, including MLP media. To keep a long story short, despite being an only child, this episode touched me in a lot of ways. It's a masterclass on how to tackle siblings growing apart with age, and the contrast between Zip and Pip's personalities really makes you wonder what exactly caused them to fall out in the first place. But the episode doesn't give us an answer, because it doesn't need to. It's implied that the two of them just stopped being close as they got older, which is incredibly realistic. This was bound to happen, as when we look back in the movie, these two aren't close at all. Pip enjoys the status quo, and Zip has a strong moral compass and opposes lying to the citizens. Even when magic is restored, we don't get a resolution to their relationship at the end of A New Generation, because these two are just so diametrically opposed to one another, and that is amplified in this episode. With Zip being hyper-focused on their mission to find the ocean lily, and Pip just wanting to have fun with their fans at the beach, the growing tension between them was bound to snap. We get to see a side to Pip that I think Chapter 2 excels at showing. Pip Petals isn't just a one-dimensional social media influencer. A lot of fans hate her character and still do, when they completely miss this whole part of her personality that makes her compelling. She is also a pony with deep insecurities, and a desire to connect with her older sister, because why wouldn't she? That's what siblings want in the end. In spite of how far apart you may grow, your desire to connect, to be loved, to spend time with a family member doesn't just disappear. You may try to deny it all you want, but there will always be a part of you who longs for the good old days. To laugh alongside your older sibling, to cuddle up next to them as they softly sing you goodnight. That's why Pip jumps at the opportunity to find the ocean lily when Misty texts a picture to them in order to lure them out. Because all she wanted from the start was to connect with her sister. Portrait for a Princess shows both Zip and Pip at their most vulnerable. We don't usually consider Zip a particularly vulnerable character, but the apology shows that and how she is the one to initiate the song. With Pip being the singing type, we'd expect her to be the one to initiate like she did earlier in the episode. But Zip is the one to do it. She initiates that connection. The scene of them making up isn't drawn out with pointless exposition. No. They do have a verbal exchange, but that is only brief as this main apology is a song that they sang for Portrait Day when they were kids. The way the cave lights up, how they play together and splash one another, flying and singing along together. It's filled with so much emotion and heart that it honestly made me cry. Even when watching this video, I still feel like tearing up. You can't hold on to your family forever, so you should cherish the time you have with them, and make the most out of every single moment. Don't close yourself off from them. Spend as much time you have with them while they are still with you. Being trapped in that cave forced Pip to confront their inner demons and grow stronger because of it. You feel for them and you root for them. This episode makes you realize that wait, Zip and Pip could be me. The story is about sisterhood and connecting with your sibling, which is a message that definitely hits a lot harder once you get older. Once you realize that your brother and sister might be the only one who is there for you when you need it most. This one episode summarizes the power of G5's story in only 22 minutes and is one of the most beautiful pieces of MLP media I've ever seen since The Perfect Pair. Yes, I'm saying it right now. It's that good. I know I'm probably gonna get hate for comparing a G5 episode to probably the greatest piece of MLP media ever made, but it is up there, man. It really is. It's emotional, heartfelt, relatable, just what more could you ask for? Even though I love this generation so much, I don't think anything from either show will ever top this masterpiece. Except maybe family trees! Hello everybody, Future Hawk here. But you guys didn't expect me to show up this late. You know how I previously said this was the greatest episode ever? Well, I can now officially confirm that Make Your Mark has surpassed this episode in terms of quality. Previously, my favorite episode was Father of the Bridalwood, and while I still adore that episode to death, Family Trees definitely emerged as a stronger entry in my most recent viewing of Chapter 5. That's where everything peaked in terms of quality in my opinion. So my thoughts here are a little outdated, but only by the smallest of margins. I probably should be angry the day of scripting is ruined, but you know what? I'm really not. If anything, the fact that I can confidently say there's better episodes than this proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Make Your Mark is an amazing show. We haven't even gotten to that peak era yet. But that's a topic for the next video. I'll see you guys then. Still though, the episode is fantastic and actually has one thing that other episodes don't, which make it stand out more. Past me will explain that defining attribute in a minute. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Oh wait, I almost forgot. Queen Haven was in this episode. She was entertaining as always, and I liked the songs she had, which is definitely more traditional style than pop, and shows a willingness on the part of the MLP staff to experiment with new genres. So that's a point against all of you for calling the music of this show generic. But in all seriousness though, one of her scenes that really stood out to me is when she explains Zip and Pip's frayed relationship to Sunny.
Did they get along as fillies?
They were attached at the wings. They did everything together. Their personalities were always so different, but they laughed about it then. Not like now.
It's a small scene, sure, but one I really believe sells her as a parental figure. The way I've seen Sunny talk about could come off as very relatable and real here. It's great to see more of this personal side to Haven. She's portrayed as a very sympathetic mother figure who had to watch her daughter slowly grow apart with age. And this little bonding subplot she has with Sunny does help to hammer home the message about reconciling with your family. Again, I admire the way she's portrayed in this episode, as leaning more into her motherly side was a very smart addition to her characters on part of the writers. The ending is also very wholesome, especially with that final shot of the portrait that parallels the one they took as fillies. Overall, this was a near perfect episode that I have no problem considering to be the definitive Zip and Pip episode. I know they have a lot more to do throughout the rest of the series and even entire tale, but if you were to ask me what episode portrayed them the best, I would still have to say it's this one all these years later. In terms of tackling their sisterhood so maturely and respectfully, Make Your Mark has never really beaten this episode. I think it's deserved. The conflict is very grounded and mature, and it feels the most like a drama about a estranged family needing to reconnect. No other episode for me to tackle them from this sort of point of view. I feel like that makes it special. This episode is the peak Zip and Pip sisterhood episode, and no one can convince me otherwise. Also, Sunny's facial expressions in this episode were just pure gold.
Can't say I know much about gardening myself. That's what the gardeners are for.
Anyways, enough of me stating the obvious. It's time for the next episode! One focused on Best Pony. So, this episode is kinda hated? I haven't seen much evidence of it myself, but at this point, I honestly don't know what to believe. Some say this episode is blatant Sunny abuse, and yeah, it kinda is. But what if I told you that was actually a strength of the episode and not a weakness? I'll get into that in a bit. But basically, this episode follows Sunny as she wrestles with her self-perception and how she sees herself based on how others see her. For me, this episode stands out in portraying a very real issue. I love that the episode doesn't hold back from showing a side to the townsfolk that we are not showing very often in MLP. The last time we saw something like this was in Fame and Misfortune. Basically, I love that the episode tackles Sunny's insecurities about herself after years of being mocked and belittled by the ponies of Maritime Bay. She's always been an idealist and sort of naive, which allows others to take advantage of her. Sunny's alicornhood for me is a representative of her being high status in the town, which is shown by others constantly wanting to be around her and kiss up to her. In modern society, we often see or hear about people taking advantage of other social status in order to benefit themselves. With alicornhood still being revered in Equestria, whenever Sunny transforms into an alicorn, the ponies all flock to her as they want a taste of that power and influence that she supposedly has. This is amplified when the filly Four and Opaline come into the picture and prey on Sunny's self-doubt. Sunny knows that the ponies only listen to her when she's an alicorn, and Opaline takes full advantage of that, and sorry to say, kinda grooms her here. We've never really seen this in MLP before, and the episode tackles it very maturely. Sunny wants to be heard, to be listened to, and that opens her up to Opaline's manipulation. And I love how that thread is not given a resolution and there's no closure with the town's ponies, because in real life, there often isn't any. And it potentially opens the doors for more grooming from our devious fire alicorn. Some people have taken issue with these bits, arguing that Sunny was dumbed down here, and that she would never believe what Opaline says. But I'd argue that these statements are completely false.
Opaline then sees that Sunny doesn't want to be an alicorn at all times, and so she talks with her through the mirror disguised as Sunny, claiming to be her inner thoughts or something? Trying to convince her to always be an alicorn. And she is being the most blatantly evil character here while talking with Sunny, by the way. Somehow, Sunny is such a complete gullible idiot that she buys all of this and doesn't realize that this obviously evil character is claiming to be her inner thoughts. Despite the fact that she's saying the complete opposite of everything Sunny has been saying the entire episode.
You have to understand the mindset of someone when they're in the most vulnerable positions. They usually don't use logic to dictate whether the person they're talking to is trustworthy or not. Sunny just wants to be heard for who she is, and Opaline is telling her everything she wants to hear. You have to put yourself in Sunny's hooves and see the world the way she sees it. As I stated prior, Sunny is a complex character with a really tragic background. This episode really hits home if we think about it in real life. How many of us have been manipulated at some point by those who want to take advantage of us due to our status? Sunny's alicorn manipulations are played off as an allegory to the poor outcast suddenly becoming the wealthy socialite. Ponies only give Sunny attention when she's an alicorn, again a rich people allegory, and the Philly Four are perfect examples of materialistic, false friends who never give a flying feather about you to begin with. There is a common critique of Sunny's wildest dreams and motivations being played up for a joke, but I never really took it that far. While there are a couple jokes made about the community garden, you can tell that Sunny is genuinely passionate about it. That's what makes the ending work so well because you wanted to help the community with this project. Yeah, she can go a little overboard, especially at the beginning where she tells the ponies that they eat too much junk food, but all she's really trying to do is give back to the town. And this is poignant because she has no reason to help them as I stated before, but she does so anyway because she has a good heart. She wants to improve the lives of her fellow ponies, but ultimately, they don't see it that way. When the town's ponies complain about her lost causes, a lot of fans took issue with this, saying they should not be downing her after she helped restore magic, to which I say, this is a vastly different scenario. Really think that all these ponies are going to trust her implicitly just because she saved them once? I mean, ideally that should be so, but need I remind you that if the ponies of Equestria operate on this mindset, then Twilight and the gang wouldn't have to teach them anything. There will always be people who hate on you despite how much good you do for them. If they already have preconceived notions about you, they're not going to listen. Huh. Kinda reminds me of this fandom. The other ponies rejecting her the way they do works because it shows how they really feel about her. In spite of how much their lives were benefited, they still hate Sunny because all they remember is that crazy young activist who broke into counter logic and disrupted a very important event. It's implied she's been doing this for years before the events of New Generation, and you can imagine how much animosity there must have built up for her in that time. It's why I had them attack her as an angry mob and forgive him because I made her subplot there an extension of this episode. People can only be preached to for so long, and Sunny here certainly isn't helping matters. Heck, Zip even points this out to her and to an extent us, the audience.
No pony in town even took one, did they?
To be fair, these flyers do have a giant no sign across a picture of French fries.
Sunny's motivations aren't being played up for jokes just because there's a couple humorous jabs about it. Most of the episode treats her wants and desires very seriously, which goes tenfold for the ending, which I will get into. If we go back to even the previous episode, you can tell that Sunny is genuine in her desire to defer community guard for Earth ponies to practice their magic, and both episodes take it seriously. She really wants to help the town, even when she has no reason to do so. That's the entire reason why she does this activism thing to begin with. Her methods may be played up for laughs, but her motivations aren't. That's the key difference with this episode, and I think people are getting the two mixed up. Moving on from that, another critique is pointed out in Saber Sparks' video, where he says this.
Sunny said something, "That's my deepest dream." For the reflection character, the villain, to be like, "That's your dream?" It's like, well, yes, me, you should know that. You're me. So I can't deny that the writing just isn't doing it for me.
Why would Sunny get suspicious about this offhand comment? As I stated before, her judgment was already clouded due to her being extremely vulnerable and lost in her excitement, so it's not like she would pick up on that. Plus, Opaline wasn't talking to her there, she was talking to herself. The episode makes that quite obvious. Notice how after saying,
"That's your wildest dream. We'll work on that."
She speaks a bit louder to Sunny when saying,
"But yes!"
When she was commenting on a community garden being Sunny's wildest dream and saying we'll work on that, she was talking to herself, not Sunny. It's the equivalent of thinking out loud. She thinks Sunny's an idiot. But she says it under her breath both because she's annoyed, as you can tell by this insanely mean bold-face, and the fact that she doesn't want Sunny to pick up on that. It's only when she knows that she has Sunny under her control that she starts showing her true colors, something Phelan Cortez points out in his review of the episode.
She may appear as a cackling and self-indulgent villain, but her real power is emotionally bewildering people whenever they are at their lowest points. And that's honestly fucking scary. Just seeing evil Sunny smile so ghastly back at a grieving Sunny was bloody fantastic. It's ironic how Opaline lets herself slip here too.
You should be praised, admired, feared.
And I agree with him 100% here. Opaline is legitimately terrifying in this scene. The way she just tears through Sunny as she's close to tears, reminding her of her traumatic past being bullied by the town for years, is just scary. She knows that she can make Sunny do whatever she wants now, and this is straight up grooming on the part of Alicorn here. Sunny can't do a thing because she thinks that she has no one else to listen to her, and she'll do anything to be heard. That's why she was so willing to try the method of being an Alicorn forever, despite how implausible that scenario is, because she was that desperate. And after Opaline stops the call, Sunny begins to start crying here with this line.
I don't need to be an alicorn for ponies to like me, right? Right?
This is significant because she is legitimately starting to wonder whether the ponies ever cared about her in the first place, and when the Philly form confirmed this, look at her expression here. She's crushed and you could just see her perfect world crumbling before her very eyes. It's a feeling that she's obviously experienced before, but she never thought she would have to do so again. You legit feel bad for her in this moment, and this leads to one of the most beautiful moments in Chapter 2.
Being an alicorn doesn't make you different. It makes you the same.
It does?
But as an earth pony or an alicorn, you've inspired all of us to be better ponies. That's your true power.
Sunny's friends comforting her when she's crying may come off as cliche, but I'd argue that it's thematically poignant. Think about it. We haven't seen Sunny outright cry before. Similar to Twilight in the early stages of FIM, the writers were very selective when to have our main character actually break down. With Twi, the first time we see her like this is in Winter Wrap-Up when Applejack calls her out for using magic. Now imagine that, but done a million times better. Especially when you realize why she's crying here. All of her hopes and dreams have been shattered here because she just found out that the other ponies never cared about her at all and only gave her the time of day when she's an alicorn. She's understandably emotionally devastated by this, and once she's at her lowest point, her friends comfort her and tells her that she does make a difference. She made a difference on them. The message rings true and is a good moral for kids to not let what others think of you define you, and again, is one of the only times we've actually seen Sunny cry in G5. She's got a lot of insecurities due to her opinions and viewpoints being mocked and belittled by the town's ponies for years, and this situation just brings all that to the surface and more, and does justice to it. This is every bit a perfect follow-up to Sunny's character arc in the movie and more. Now, what about Pip's speed plot, I hear you asking? I barely even talked about that. Well, it's fine. That's really about it. I have to admit I wasn't really invested in her plotline here as much as I was to Sunny's. She really was the beating heart of this episode. Whereas Pip's quote-unquote arc about becoming viral never did click with me. It could have been any other episode and nothing would have changed aside from 10 seconds of the ending. As I said, it's fine. It's not bad by any means, I just couldn't really relate to it all that much. Maybe it was because I don't really relate to using a baby to go viral, or the fact that this whole thing doesn't really gel with the very personal, mature story that Sunny's going through, and acts more as a distraction from the main plot. A lot of it was Pip just acting cringy, especially with that short montage of her literally imitating Sparky's infant mannerisms, and it acts a ton of whiplash, especially when the last episode portrayed her so brilliantly. I don't know, it feels like a complete 180. That's why, as much as I love this episode, how it serves as a fantastic inspiration for Sunny's arc in the Misty saga, I can't quite consider this my favorite. Still though, the message about not taking yourself too seriously and how it's good to laugh at yourself once in a while is a great message for kids. It's just incongruent with what Sunny goes on with her, and it wasn't executed the best. But back to Sunny's plotline, the ending with the community garden being built is just utter perfection, and really hammers home the message of the episode. The remaining main five come together and fulfill Sunny's greatest desire by building the community garden themselves, proving the town's ponies wrong once and for all. Like Fame and Misfortune before it, the resolution is intimate rather than large scale, with more of a focus on what the main character teaches individuals rather than a selective whole. Because there was no way Sunny was able to convince the other ponies to listen to her. They didn't care what she was teaching them. All they cared about was the fame and prestige that the alicorn would give them. Instead, the episode hammers home its message to Sunny's friends, showing her how much she impacted them, and it moves her. Through their actions, she realizes the ponies do care about her for who she is, rather than what she is. And that is a fantastic lesson to teach kids, especially in today's climate. You shouldn't let what others think of you to define your self-perception. You can't please everyone. You should lean more into those who do care about you. Sunny's friends are the ultimate example of true friends who are there for you no matter what, juxtaposed with the Philly Four, who only wanted to latch onto her for popularity. It's a resolution that really makes the allegory hit home, and makes this episode come off as one to make your mark strongest, even if it couldn't beat the last episode for obvious reasons. Now, I admittedly don't have a lot to say about this episode, other than it's a fantastic exploration of the dynamic between Sunny and Hitch, that once again acts like an extension to the movie. Sunny and Hitch's relationship in a new generation was one that really intrigued me. Two childhood friends forced apart by circumstances beyond their control, having to learn to reconnect with one another in a quest to restore magic. Well, now that we have a more peaceful status quo, what is the next step for these two? Well, obviously, they need to walk in each other's hooves and learn what it's like to be each other. This episode is primarily concerned with showing our core characters what it's like to be the other person, or pony in this case. The main conflict stems from Sunny and Hitch misunderstanding the importance of one's duties. So what does Sparky do? Switch their cutie marks, which in turn flips their personalities. Now, right off the bat, I know we have the inevitable comparisons to a royal problem, but I'd argue that this episode executes moral much better than a royal problem. Why? Well, it's for one simple reason. The conflict is grounded in reality and stays consistent throughout its runtime. Whereas the royal problem started off as grounded and then went to insane world-ending territory by the end by introducing Celeste's edgy social media account and Nightmare Moon fighting, the cutie mark mix-up stays consistent throughout its entire runtime by not forcing the resolution to external means. Sunny and Hitch both choose to make up when they do. Yeah, the animals getting out of control is a factor in the plot, but it doesn't force them to make up. Sunny and Hitch want to help each other because through this wacky experience, they finally understand each other's responsibilities. The conflict goes over the top, sure, but it's the grounded kind of over the top. And that is where the lack of fantasy setting plays a major benefiting factor for G5. Because we're not in, we'll call it medieval times because why not, the writers aren't tempted to force a resolution by bringing out world-destroying stakes. Daybreaker and Nightmare Moon fighting cheapens the resolution because it's like, oh, the princesses see the result of their fighting, now they have to make up. But the episode subverts this by having a simple critter conflict be our obstacle. But obvious comparisons aside, the episode goes out of its way to examine the core flaw in Sunny and Hitch's relationship. That being the inability to understand each other. They may have been the best of friends since childhood, But there was always this communication barrier that prevented them from truly respecting each other's goals and aspirations. They were always trying to one-up each other before this. Who was morally superior? Who contributes to the good of Maritime Bay the most? The sheriff who's been protecting the town for years? Or the activists who turned out to be right in the end, by restoring magic and unity? Like I already established, it was the logical next step for them to be put in this sort of predicament. It was the ultimate test of their friendship, and leaves a lasting impact on them both. Sunny is definitely stubborn, and Hitch is definitely stubborn-er. Yeah, that's a word alright.
Learn how to spell.
They had to experience each other's duties and see how hard it was to be each other in order for the message of the episode to hit home. That pervasive plague of not being able to properly communicate just how important their responsibilities are comes to the surface and is executed in the best way possible. It's a case of not knowing just how hard it can be for the other person unless you yourself see what they're going through. But how can you see it without experiencing it? That is the question the episode asks, and it's a particularly thought-provoking one. Despite this episode being seemingly goofy on the surface, is this underlying thematic idea that makes you rethink their entire dynamic in a whole new light, and by the end, they learn an important lesson. There is of course a surface level critique that, oh of course Hitch's job is important, he's the leader of Maritime Bay, but I'd argue it's a lot more deeper than that. The episode isn't really concerned about the technicalities of who does what, but more so on what their jobs mean to each other, and how it makes them who they are. Sunny may be just a smoothie maker, but that job is just as important to her as Hitch's responsibilities are as sheriff. She takes pride in it, and nobody can do it the way she can and vice versa, which was the point behind these lines.
Well, nobody can be Hitch like you can.
And no pony can be Sunny like you can.
If you take these two out of their elements, it doesn't work, and the episode shows that. Through this, it provides more depth to our main leads. Now, Misty and Opaline don't really have much to do here, obviously, but their involvement this time is at least a bit more substantial. Think about it. It's due to this episode that Misty's whole arc was able to start because Opaline found out where Sunny's lantern was hidden, which contained a lot of prisming magic. Because they were sending that magical mouse thing into the Bright House to scout out the lantern, she got the idea to send Misty in to retrieve it, which gradually led to the latter slowly questioning what she was taught all her life. And this story would not be the same without her and Misty scheming here. Plus, we get to see how much more abusive Opaline actually is towards Misty, when she questions the mouse thing, which plants a seed of empathy in the audience's minds for the unicorn, and that this moment gets them wanting to root for her to find her own path, a narrative thread that the next episode directly picks up on. Another connection to the movie that I really appreciate is the reintroduction of the secret hoofstick that Sunny and Hitch have. This is an aspect so unique and specific to these two characters, that if you swap it out with any pony else, it would not have the same effect. It's a unique symbol of their friendship. This act just tells the reconnecting of their bond after all these years. They've had it rough, but this experience taught them a lot. The fact that the writers of this episode went so far as to include that really shows me how much they understand these two, and it's honestly a shame that both this and Sunny Side Up were the only episodes focused on these two. Oh well. Whenever Sunny and Hitch's relationship is focused on, you can really tell that the staff understand what made them work in the movie, and applied the same sort of maturity here. Similar as to how Portrait of a Princess was about Zip and Pip rebuilding their estranged relationship, the same absolutely applies here. Being one of the last proud Starblazer shippers in existence, this episode was a home run for me in the way it tackled their dynamic so respectfully and maturely, and it taught a fantastic moral to kids about understanding the responsibilities of others. The more grounded premise and inherent relatability that just comes from seeing these two best friends work out their issues presents a genuinely heartfelt story, with a ton of laugh stored in all the same. It is a very underrated episode in my opinion, and one that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Also, looking back, I just realized this. There's this line that Seashell says at the end of the episode that really means a whole lot more with the benefit of hindsight. How come no one's mentioning this?
Yeah, it's about this tree that grows special crystals called elements. Wow, cool. Tell me more.
It's about this tree that grows special
These trees are very powerful, created only when ponies come together through true friendship. They are our great protectors, and we in turn must protect them.
Not 3 trees.
It's 4.
She grew a brand new one for us in Zephyr Heights.
The pony's unity powers the trees!
I didn't learn anything. I was right all along.
Anyways, it's time to move on to what I believe to be the best Izzy episode so far. Next! Now, I for one, love this episode. Not only do we finally get to see Misty meet the main 5, not only do we get some actual hint towards the backstory for G5, not only do we get world building by establishing Briarwood traditions, but this episode provided a fantastic character study for Izzy, and made her grapple with the feeling of homesickness. Now, homesickness is something that MLP has tackled before in Castle Sweet Castle, but what makes this episode stand out from the one before it is that the way Izzy is feeling ties back to who she is, which makes the episode a lot stronger. Like FIM before it, these 8 episodes of Make Your Mark are all about establishing the characters and developing them. We'll have plenty of time to see the plot advance in future episodes, but we're getting to know the characters here, so the main plot has to take a back seat. Again, people did complain about this in FIM, so I don't know why there appears to be a double standard. Despite the chapter format, we have to remember that Make Your Mark is in its first season. There's still plenty of time to develop the plot further in future seasons. So Opaline sends Misty to spy on the main five in order to take Sunny's lantern, and she ends up having way more fun than she should at the Crystal Bright House. I know I avoided talking about the villains up until this point, and that was an intentional choice on my part, because these last 3 episodes are where the development for them really comes in. Now when Misty showed up, people were all, "Why didn't Sunny recognize her from Alicon? That's a continuity error." Well, there's a simple explanation for that, and it all has to do with the age-old cartoon trope of the main character not recognizing the other character when they're in disguise. Now, to be fair, Misty doesn't really do anything of substance in that episode. I mean, she was mainly just background fodder. Take her out and the story wouldn't have changed unlike the previous episodes, where her involvement actually incited some sort of conflict. But my point is, the main reason why Sunny doesn't recognize her in the traditional unicorn sleepover is because Misty was wearing glasses throughout Alicon, and the Philly Four were calling her all sorts of names, from Minty to even Marcy. Man, that's a deep cut reference, and never by her actual name, which is a deliberate choice on the part of the staff. Because of her disguise and the fact that Sunny doesn't even get to know her in that episode, it's perfectly understandable why she wouldn't recognize her here. This isn't a continuity error at all, and while I think her involvement throughout the former didn't really amount to anything, I can at least applaud the way the writers used her appearance there, as they were really careful not to draw any sort of suspicion so she could be used later. Before we talk about Izzy, I want to first discuss Misty and how I think this episode is significant to her too. As established by previous Opaline scenes, Misty lives in an abusive household. It's clear that Opaline doesn't care about her and is just stringing her along in order to get what she wants. Misty's main motivation for serving Opaline is that she wants a cutie mark, and she would do whatever it takes to earn it. Misty was raised her entire life to serve Opaline's whims, so when she finally gets a taste of the outside world, it's great. She's gotten a taste of freedom, now she's gonna want more of it until she outright leaves Opaline for good. This episode is the true start to her arc, which is why it matters so much from a character perspective. This whole episode is all about showcasing how much better her life could be with the main five rather than Opaline, and you really get to see the cracks start to form in their dynamic just from the ending. She's still set on taking the lantern, but she's not as willing as she once was, and she begins to have doubts in her mind about which side is truly the right one to take. Her path is torn in 2 different directions, and we still get to see that buildup of trust between her and the other ponies from this chapter onwards. The bond she and Izzy share is genuinely heartwarming to see, and that segues us to talking about the latter. Now, it's been established that Izzy is hyperactive and bubbly, just like Pinkie Pie and G4 before her. However, what separates her from Pinkie and what makes her an entirely different character is her upbringing, and literally everything else about her aside from the surface level. As a character, Izzy is very open to making new friends and has a very creative side about her, yet she is also very humble and sensitive at her best. What makes Izzy a strong character in her own right is the way that she is very encouraging towards others, but she also has a lot of deep character layers that are constantly explored throughout G5. In the movie, Izzy values her friends and the chances they've given her. She grew up in a unicorn society that hated other types of ponies, yet despite that, she never stopped wanting to make new friends. She was very lonely before she met her new friends, and that loneliness translated into trying to cover up her insecurities through constant cheerfulness and excitement. Whereas Pinkie already had tons of friends before she met Twilight, Izzy was a pony who started out alone and had no one, to a pony who got to share her customs, traditions, creativity, and idealism with others. In this episode, we find out that Izzy is homesick for Bridalwood, which adds a huge depth to her character. Moving to a new place and having to adapt to a new environment is hard, and this episode showcased that beautifully. Throughout Make Your Mark, we constantly see more sides to Izzy's character, and that makes her so much stronger than her character archetype. Izzy being homesick is poignant because it's a part of her identity, baked into the very core of her being. She grew up there, so in spite of getting everything she wanted and more, a part of her still longs for the simpler times. She might have been lonely, but at least she was home. The difference between this and Castle Sweet Castle is being homesick for your old house, being homesick for your old life. And it's an incredibly mature way to tackle her character, and manages to smartly deconstruct her surface level archetype. You see more beneath the surface than just a cheerful facade that Izzy puts up. You get to see more of the sincerity that makes her character work so well. One of the reasons why she's among my favorite LMP characters ever is because of the many layers she has. The episode is able to showcase those brilliantly. By choosing to reveal that she's homesick, the writers are effectively putting you in her hooves and forcing you to confront that feeling yourself. Like many people in this situation, Izzy tries to pretend like everything is fine, that she has everything under control, but you slowly see the cracks build in that facade throughout the episode's run, both from her dialogue and facial reactions. It's subtle, it doesn't give everything away, but the slow buildup is meant to hit that there's something wrong that she's not telling us. You as a viewer can see there's something wrong with her, even if her friends don't, but it doesn't fully hit you until everything comes tumbling down and she's forced to admit everything she's been bottling up this whole time. It's shockingly emotional for a character that on the surface is meant to portray as a comedic relief for the group, and it's a masterclass in great writing from this show. The episode revolves around Izzy teaching her friends Bridalwood traditions, all the while Misty does Misty things. Now we as an audience know that Misty is not from Bridalwood, but Izzy doesn't. And considering Izzy is so happy about Misty's company, we don't want her to find out the truth. And after the sleepover goes horribly wrong and Izzy admits she's homesick, her friends band together to build her a little piece of Bridalwood in her own room, which is just so sweet. This episode is an allegory for fitting in, moving into a new environment, / adapting to a new environment. This episode picks up on a loose thread the new generation set up, and just runs with it, and the result is just great. It's a perfect example of learning other traditions as well as having friends who will be there for you in your time of need. It is being homesick here works because that's the normal response you'd expect from moving to a new place. This episode was actually the inspiration behind Izzy's arc in Forgiven, and I can't give it enough for tackling such a hard topic so maturely and respectfully. Before I move on to Whodunit, I'd like to address the criticism about the backstory scene. For some reason, fans really seem to take issue with Sunny's explanation of equestrian history, saying that the whole Earth Pony getting hurt by a unicorn thing was just stupid.
Twilight created the crystals to protect them somehow. To say this story is woolly doesn't quite begin to describe it.
Wait, so was she just putting the magic in there to protect them from Opaline, or was she doing it to stop the ponies from fighting? I can see a way that it would be both, but I'm just wondering how many reasons we're going to be given for magic disappearing and the cause of Equestria's division before we're given a concrete, cohesive story.
Me? I knew that wasn't the full backstory from the very beginning, simply due to how sanitized and clean it seemed. We know Argyle told this to her as a filly because the whole thing sounds so sugar-coated for little Sunny's ears, and a lot of important details seem to be left out. It's obvious that a lot more went down, and the writers were saving this explanation for future episodes. And guess what? I was absolutely right! In Chapter 6, we actually got an explanation from Spike that links everything we've been told so far together. The dragons were involved, Opaline tried to steal the pony's magic, so on and so forth. Make Your Mark took its time to develop its grand story. It dropped hints and clues based off of what the ponies knew, while planting seeds for more answers, which is how smart storytelling is done. It had a plan and took its time to develop each new piece of lore. But the most upsetting part for me is, these people didn't want to see that. They didn't want to hear more. They were content to just take what this episode told them at face value and not try and look deeper into it. No thought as to why Twilight had to create the crystals, just that she did, or how it tied back to what Opaline tried to do. Now, like I established in the previous parts, I want to be fair to people criticizing this scene. In spite of everything I just said, I don't blame people for not liking the fact that G5 is a sequel. I feel like most of the inherent bias against this generation comes from the fact that it is a sequel to G4. That's what made people turn away from it at first. It was a controversial choice, I know, and I understand that. You don't have to like the fact that Twilight created the crystals to store magic. That's fine. But please, just be open-minded to learning more. Don't close yourself off from it just because you think Twilight would never do this. Trying to jump to conclusions when you don't even have the full backstory yet makes this lack of effort on the part of the hate them even more egregious with the benefit of hindsight. What happened to the theories, the headcanons, the excitement, and the intrigue to learn more? The amount of hints we got should have led to the next ink rose. But no, they instead call this a terrible explanation and leave it at that. I miss what this fandom used to be, can you tell? Fantastic episode though, and I'll always applaud it for expanding on Izzy's character in a very smart and mature manner. What is this? Another Zip and Pip episode? And it's really good? Are you sure they're not the real main characters of this generation, Hasbro? In all seriousness though, this was really good. Once again, I like the sister dynamic and the moral lesson here. Sunny's lantern goes missing and it's up to Detective Zip to solve the case. Only wait a minute. The lantern was already found? What? I for one love how this episode subverts the mystery genre rather than playing it completely straight like Mystery and the Friendship Express. We already know as the audience who has the lantern for the majority of the episode's runtime, even if Zip doesn't. It's Pip, and she took it after Misty stole it because she saw how much fun Zip was having while solving the case she was on. It's a classic case of doing the wrong thing for the right reasons, and even after Zip thinks that the whole case was for nothing, Pip reminds her that as long as she has fun doing what she loves, that is what ultimately matters in the end. This episode manages again to show a side to Pip that we were criminally robbed of in the movie. Pip is not only a talented singer and influencer, but she has deep insecurities about being a supportive sister. The reason why Pip takes the lantern is that she wants to support Zip's dreams of being a true detective. It is these kinds of episodes that make Pip stand out as a character. When the writers focus on other aspects of her personality besides being an influencer, they are able to make Pip one of the best characters of the show. The way she stands up for Misty and Anne was so sweet, and even though you know this act is going to come back to bite her later once she realizes that Misty was working with Opaline the whole time, you almost don't want it to be true for that exact same reason. Tootsie Forever did take issue with this aspect of the episode, basically implying that it was nonsensical for the moral to be that Zip was in the wrong, when she knew something was up with Misty all along.
With the unicorn, she did her detective work and put all the pieces together, which led her to confront Misty, and we are led to believe that Zip is the one being ridiculous. What the f-
There's just one problem I have with this critique, and it mainly comes down to the fact that Misty did not actually steal the lantern. She started to, but panicked and buried it instead in order to come back for it. Pip was actually the one to take it off, so by that account, Zip was wrong to suspect Misty, which is why the payoff works so well. Misty was not in the wrong here, so you can't say that Zip was in the right. And let's talk about the real reason why Misty didn't take off with the lantern, because this is actually a massive point of contention. Starstrike called out the fact that she left the lantern to pick up later a horribly contrived reason for the conflict to start, when that could be further from the truth.
Now, if you were Misty, what do you do in this scenario? Do you A, bring the lantern back to Opaline to complete the mission, or B, have a change of heart after bonding with your new friends and return the lantern and warn them of Opaline? Well, neither, because the answer is C! Bury the lantern in the garden right outside their home so that you can come back and pick it up later for some reason. Couldn't we have at least been given an explanation?
The main problem I have with Starstrike saying that there was no reason for Misty hiding the lantern in the first place is the fact that the episode does give a reason, and it actually comes from Misty herself in this scene. She in fact says that she panicked and hid it out of fear.
Oh, why did I think burying it was enough to keep it hidden? Oh, why do I always panic and do the wrong thing?
If you remember from the beginning of the episode, Zip overheard the noise outside and opened the window to check, which would cause Misty to panic and hide the lantern instead. She didn't want the Pegasus catching her and exposing the whole plan to steal the lantern, so she did the only thing she could in that moment. Misty slips up sometimes, and that's what makes her endearing. It's clear that she takes no joy in doing any of this, and that little piece of information is important to remember. The dynamic between her and Opaline isn't just your typical evil mastermind and sidekick stick. What differentiates Make Your Mark from the other shows that use this trope is that Misty's an actual character who you're supposed to root for. And that goes tenfold for the next episode. And I do want you guys to remember this bit of information for later, because some people were in fact very quick to dismiss Misty's character right out of the gate. An aspect of the Chapter 2 hate that does still bother me to this day.
Speaking of Misty, I guess I should bring her up since the fandom won't stop simping about her. She's just the villain's sad comic relief. I don't get the obsession with her. She's just the awkward, kooky, wacky, weird pony who has no self-esteem. Oh wait, I forgot what fandom I'm in.
The remaining main 5 admittedly don't have much to do, but that's okay because this is not their episode. That honor would go to the next one. What this subplot did accomplish, however, was one huge thing that gets paid off in Winter Wish Day. Setting up on how the lantern really works, and how it contains a piece of the unity magic inside it. We know now that the magic of the crystals is fueled by the unity of the ponies, and the episode shows us that near the end. It's an interesting bit of foreshadowing as to what exactly Opaline's truly afraid of, and why she wants to possess the prismatic magic so badly. People like to say the show forgot about the lantern as it went along, but I have to disagree. Mainly because this was a plot thread that got resolved in a quick and tidy manner. It was set up and had a satisfying payoff. But we'll get to that payoff soon. With the lantern being the focus of 2 episodes straight, it was important for the show to focus on what exactly it was, and how it connects to the power of crystals. And they did that. I can see some complaining about the fact that Sunny Others didn't do much, but I personally see the relegation to a B-plot as necessary. The subplot serves its purpose to culminate in us learning the truth about the lantern, and it didn't go on longer than it needed to. The real heart of this episode was on Zip's investigation, and Pip's desire to see her sister happy. That was where all the emotional heart came from, and the episode does a great job of keeping the focus on where it needed to be. Ultimately, this episode was really good, and it once again shows more personality traits for Pip that completely trounces her one-dimensional portrayal in the movie. I really don't get the hate for her character. Yes, the social media humor that they use with her is cringy, but that's not all to her character. She's also a kind and devoted friend, as well as a supportive sister who would do anything to make her older sibling feel happy. Honestly, if you still hate her after this episode, then I don't know what's wrong with you. Seriously, you need help. Okay, maybe that's a little too harsh, but you get what I mean. I am a staunch Pip Petals defender because these episodes show me the potential that she has as a character. I absolutely adore the bond that she and Zip have, and it's clear that the writers really excel in this department. Pip apologizing to Zip feels very sweet, and again, you understand why she took the lantern. She just wanted her sister to have fun, and she worried that if Zip did find the lantern, then that fun would be over. Her reasoning comes from a place of genuine love, as that's what siblings do for one another, and it's only when Zip is cornering Misty, backing her against the wall and accusing her of stealing the lantern does Pip finally come clean and admit everything, because the last thing she wants is to have some pony innocent be accused of this. She acknowledges what she did was wrong, but that she reacted out of instinct. We all do something that we tend to regret later on, and Pip admits that she loved seeing Zip so happy doing what she loved, and that she never meant for things to escalate the way they did. The two laugh over this, and Zip acknowledges that while this did end up becoming a wild goose chase, she had lots of fun doing it. It's a scene once again filled with so much love and heart. Seeing Zip get into all sorts of detective antics was really funny to see unfold. I think my favorite part has to be when she interrogated Izzy and then fell into a bathtub. Now that's FIM levels of comedy gold for you. I feel like a lot of people don't understand this episode. The majority opinion appears to be that it is an underwhelming final episode of Chapter 2, and it doesn't feel like a season finale. But I, as you probably come to expect from me at this point, strongly disagree. For me, Have You Seen This Dragon is a strong episode with an emotional core about fatherhood and parental responsibility. This is where Hitch's love for Sparky is put at the forefront. It's one of the many times we see him actually be stressed out on a personal level. He loves Baby Dragon and treats him like his son. You can see how losing his little companion stresses him out to the point of mentally snapping. After years of being a lone stallion with a duty, Hitch is finally reminded of what it is like to feel love. He'll do anything to protect Sparky, and you see firsthand how this affects him. This works the way it does because Hitch's love for Sparky is built up throughout the entire chapter, so it can culminate here in one final display. Through portraying Hitch as a loving father who worries about his son, it puts him on a level that is relatable to us, the audience. This is why Sparky works as a character. A lot of people hate on him for what seems like no other reason than he apparently looks ugly, but Sparky's thematic purpose is to provide Hitch with love, to help melt a heart that's been hardened by years of paranoia and distrust. Similar to how Twilight and Spike are the focuses of FIM, I choose to believe that it is the same case here. Sparky may not be doing much at the moment, but we can't ignore how important he is to Hitch. The two are connected on an extremely personal level, and taking him away would make Hitch not the same. That's not to say that his entire life revolves around Sparky, because as we established before, that is not the case. But Sparky serves a purpose in the overall plot that no other character, not even Sunny, can fill. He is the magnet that draws Hitch back from the stresses of his everyday job and reminds him that it is okay to have fun as well. Sparky is more than just the generic baby character for marketing that so many like to pass him off as. He is an integral part of Make Your Mark's story, and Hitch's arc throughout the show would not be the same without him. And that's not even talking about the further development he gets in the peak era of this show last year, which I will be talking about in the next video. He's so undervalued by many, and I really wish people weren't so quick to dismiss him the way they did before his arc could really take off. He's definitely not my favorite character of all time in this generation, not by a long shot, but after seeing the brilliant way his storyline got resolved in Chapter 6, and how all the setup he had in this chapter culminated in such an epic payoff, I am so glad I stuck by this baby dragon side and got to watch it all pan out. So while the main five are searching everywhere for Sparky, we find out that Misty is hiding him inside of Izzy's closet, and this is where we get more character development for Misty. While it does only establish the same information on a basic level, the reason why we spend so much time here is because we have to remember one thing about our favorite blue unicorn. She has conflict. She doesn't want to give Sparky to Opaline, but she feels like she has to. After making friends with the ponies, she doesn't want to betray their trust. But she ultimately wants to be accepted by society. That's why she wants her cutie mark. Misty feels like an outcast, and all she wants to do is feel normal. For her entire life, she grew up without a cutie mark, and she saw how everyone else had one except for her. This in turn makes her incredibly self-conscious, and she wants to be like the other ponies. Because her worldviews had been twisted by Opaline, she thought that blindly following orders was always the way to go. But she is starting to see the cracks forming in that mindset. She was given friendship and love, and she is starting to see life outside the walls of a dark palace and a single dog bed. She is unsure where she wants to go in life, and despite the love she was given by her newfound friends, it is not enough, and she commits herself to this mission. But you know that she means well in doing so, seeing as how she promises to give Sparky back afterwards.
Once I get it, I promise to bring you back. I've kind of grown to like you.
This line is significant because it establishes that she is a morally complex character. She has a good heart, and she believes she's doing the right thing by ignoring her heart and continuing to obey Opaline. She is so relatable that when she fails to nab Sparky, you really feel for her. This is one of the many things that Make Your Mark does best in my opinion, having you unintentionally root for one of the antagonists by making them relatable. We got some crazy shenanigans in the town and it culminates with Hitch literally becoming Batman. No, really. Just look at him in this shot. Doesn't he kind of look like a discount cake crusader to you? As a massive Batman fan, this scene just gives me life.
Evil, I'm coming for you!
Hitch? Zoom? Thunder? What are they doing here?
It looks like Hitch is gearing up for something epic.
And intense.
And too much.
Go! Leave no stone unturned!
Told ya. We gotta find that dragon. Get fast!
It's the moment Hitch finally loses it and goes completely insane, terrorizing the populace and interrogating any pony he sees. This scene is just comedic gold, and it shows that the MLP staff still have a knack for creating wacky and crazy scenarios. The whole scene is definitely hilarious for sure, but there's an underlying layer of tragedy to it all the same. This is where Hitch loses it. He's so desperate to find Sparky to the point where he seeks outright vengeance on the culprit who dragon napped him. This is a fantastic commentary on how stressful it can be for parents when their kids goes missing. We hear about this stuff happening all the time in the news every day, and you can imagine how stressful it can be for parents who've lost their kids. If you've ever been in this situation, you can see yourself in Hitch. You can understand what he's going through. He's lost the only creature he ever cared about, the only person he treated like his own son, and now he's out for blood. And he will stop at nothing until justice is brought upon the culprit. The scene has shockingly mature undertones, while still being hilarious to kids. On the surface, you can just laugh along at the idiotic shenanigans of Bat Stallion on his quest for vengeance. But if you're in the know, or have gone through what he's gone through, your heart just goes out to him, and you feel for his perceived loss. And it's that sort of dichotomy that makes this scene so great from a writing standpoint. He does calm down after a while after Sunny talks him out of it, and this is where we get another one of the most beautiful songs in this chapter. A special tune. Living up to its name, this song is a full-on special lullaby for Sparky that causes him to respond and foil Misty's plans to take him. She just managed to catch a bit of his dragon fire though, and this is where we're going to talk about the music for G5. A lot of people are saying it's generic pop and nothing else, yet that is entirely not true. It is primarily pop, but the staff aren't afraid to experiment with other genres as seen through this movie and now this. Now as to why it's pop, well the most obvious reason is that it's a new era of MLP and it's trying to be more modern. I know everyone misses the downright Broadway feel of FIM, but things change and we should be accepting of new genres taking over for each generation. Not everything can stay the exact same. So all our characters eventually find Sparky and Misty returns home to Opaline, where we get my absolute favorite scene of the episode, mainly for how heartbreaking it is. I'm gonna let you take a listen.
And you'll give me a cutie mark?
That measly drop of dragon fire wasn't enough. And you won't be enough, Misty. Not until you can prove that you're actually useful and get that dragon!
For some pony made of fire, I've never met a heart so cold.
This scene broke me, and it cemented me that not only is Misty one of the best characters in the entire show, but that Opaline is a great villain. Before I believed that she was just passable, but this episode won me over. I love Opaline as a villain. The reason why she works well is not only was she an integral part of the lore for this generation, was a deliciously cruel and sadistic antagonist who will do anything, including hurting others to achieve her goals, but she has a toxic parental connection to Misty, which is one of the most intriguing aspects. I'm not going to say everything here because I'm actually planning a full retrospective video on her, which will explain why she works so well from a writing standpoint. Opaline has been trashed on by way too many people for no reason other than by their made-up narratives, and someone's got to do the proper analysis that the fandom refuses to do. But until then, I will attempt to say what I can here without spoiling too much for that video. As someone to focus on the abusive relationship between she and Misty a lot in my own saga, this is something I still cannot believe the show staff got away with. To show a dynamic like this so realistically in a kid's cartoon reflects an insane level of trust in the audience on part of the staff. This sort of dynamic is unlike any Opaline antagonist we've seen so far. The way she gaslights and belittles Misty makes her the special kind of despicable. Because we know she raised Misty, you can only imagine what sort of twisted worldview she might have imposed on Unicorn from such a young age. She told Misty that only through her could she be special, virtually making the latter a slave to her every whim because she feels like she has no other choice. Misty doubts herself and is easily scared of failing her. She wants nothing more than to be a normal pony, and Opaline feeds on that, using that devotion to make her constantly doubt her self-worth on her own. Opaline knows what she wants and she'll do anything to get it, even if it means emotionally scarring someone else in the process. I personally see this as a dark reflection of Twilight and Celestia. What if Celestia was like this in some twisted alternate universe? How would Twilight turn out if she was never given the support by her mentor? It's a question you almost don't want answered, as it's a scary prospect to think about. I feel like the stuff she says comes from her past experience in Skyros, so it makes me curious as to what exactly made her the way she is. With Season 2 of Tired Chill having Skyros as a major plotline, I still feel like we might get an answer of some sort at some point. Opaline's biggest strength of a villain in this chapter is manipulation. To this end, it makes it easier to see just how she might have split up the ponies in the past during Twilight's reign. It would take a lot to undo the unity we saw in the last problem, but through these 8 episodes, you see how Opaline could have done that. You see how powerful her words are on individual ponies, and as I established before, if Chrysalis could do it in one season, then so can Opaline. This is why Opaline is such an effective antagonist. Again, I'll get into this more in my retrospective video, coming insert the date it actually gets done here to a YouTube screen near you. Seeing Misty cry afterwards was just so sad, and this scene alone was the inspiration behind Worthless, the very story that kickstarted the Misty saga. I just felt so inspired after watching this episode, especially Misty's plotline. That story wouldn't have been possible without this scene cementing Misty as a central character this generation, and this was the place where her arc really started to take off. It was worth to question whether Opaline ever truly loved her, and is a realistic depiction of abuse. Misty is trapped in a life she doesn't want to live, and she doesn't get a resolution to her situation, at least not now. She's just left there to cry alone with no one there to comfort her. This is extremely tragic and makes you want to root for her to choose the right path. In her The Problem with Misty video, Addie Lovestar tried to say that Misty is a very safe character for the audience to root for. She's a blank slate with no identity of her own to attach yourselves to. Even going so far as to ask whether we would still root for her if she was a boy. Questionable implications there much? She tried to say that Misty has no agency as a character, yet that isn't the case at all. In fact, every episode from the traditional Unicorn Sleepover onwards is about Misty gaining self-identity. This episode shows her having the most development out of the whole chapter, and you really get a feel for her goals and aspirations, so that's a moot point. The reason why people like myself latched onto her isn't because she's a character that's impossible to hate. It's because she's a morally complex individual with her own distinct personality. The narrative purpose of Misty meeting the main 5 was for her to discover life outside Opaline's castle and develop her own self-identity. And we slowly see her develop that self-identity, to the point where she's beginning to doubt her loyalty to Opaline, as evidenced by that piece of dialogue she says before crying.
I've never met a heart so cold.
She's beginning to realize what her life is truly like here, in comparison to the love that her newfound friends gave her. That is the point of her character arc here. Anyways, the episode has a wonderful sense of finality to it. Even though it's not the finality of Season 1, that honor would actually go to Winter Wish Day according to the official Wikipedia article, it still feels final. It still feels like all the setup and groundwork has been laid, now future episodes can build off of it. Not only that, but it has an emotional core to center of it as well. The status quo has already changed drastically from when the chapter first started, which disproves LMP5's argument of nothing happening in this chapter. The First Together tree has been grown, which we'll learn more about later. Opaline now has a significant boost of power, and Misty is continuing to see the main 5 and getting to know them, which will eventually lead her to joining Sunny and the others. The episode is a fantastic commentary on fatherhood, and it shines great light on Hitch's spell with Sparky, while also laying the foundation for future plot revelations to come. So now would be the time I move on to the conclusion segment, right? Well, not exactly. It turns out we still have one more special to go before I can give my final thoughts on this first era of Make Your Mark. And that is the real finale to Season 1, Winter Wish Day. The first ever Christmas special that this generation had. And for this, I want to ask the overarching question. Is Winter Wish Day a good holiday special? Yes. As the first holiday episode that this generation had, I say they executed it pretty well. I'm not going to say it's completely perfect with zero flaws whatsoever, as compared to the regular episodes that I find near flawless, the 4 specials that Make Your Mark had always seemed to struggle with the execution of certain concepts or ideas. Not to an egregious extent, but there are always areas that could be improved. Plus, with this and Briarwood stock not being plot-relevant specials, I can understand people feel like things must always be constantly moving. Me, however, I don't think that way, and here's why. While a central moving plot is important to any serialized show, the beauty of the series format is that the additional runtime can be dedicated to individual stories and characters that don't exactly have to advance the main plot. And make no mistake, this special has a story. It focuses on our main characters first and foremost, and the story is self-contained, learning about the cultures they celebrate, without having to tie itself to the grander narrative. But we'll get to that soon. Before I get to what makes the special work, I want to acknowledge the biggest criticism that this episode gets, and it's probably something you've heard circulating around before. That being a supposed major continuity error with Tired Tale. If you guys remember, the mirror stream is shown to be created a second time when Sunny and the others need to travel. The main issue that fans took with this is that the mirror stream was already created for the first time in the Tired Tale episode, Take Flight in the Mirror Stream. They argued that this was a blatant continuity error between the two shows. But here's why that's not actually the case. To be fair, even I believe this was true for the longest time. But what finally killed the lack of continuity argument for me was on my most recent viewing of the special, specifically for this video. And I just happened to notice this piece of dialogue.
Zip and I have a surprise for you!
Surprise?
How would Izzy and Zip know that the Lantern could create the mirror stream here, unless they already tried it before? It's a small piece of dialogue, sure, but it actually establishes that Izzy and Zip knew about the Lantern's capabilities and how it created the ship. The Lantern is what powers up the mirror stream, as it's a ship made out of magic. You remove it, the mirror stream is converted back to that dusty old tram car, which is why we never see the Lantern take it off from its spot again. Smart choice, guys, considering you're always traveling in it. This isn't a continuity error between the two shows, because having this dialogue here actually establishes that the mirror stream was created once, and Zip and Izzy know about the Lantern's ability to generate it. Now let's talk in depth about why this special is good, and why it works as the first major holiday special for this generation. I think the best place to start is the amount of world building that the special added to G5. Think I've officially gone off the rails? Well, let me explain. The basic premise of the special is getting to see all the different holiday traditions for the 3 different pony civilizations. Heartwarming Eve is gone and has been replaced by Wishentine, Frosty Shivers, and a titular Winter Wish Day. The reason why I find this to be a smart creative decision on the part of the staff is due to the fact that the 3 distinct ways the ponies have of celebrating this holiday feel unique in their own ways. I for one find the concept of the 3 different holidays very interesting, as it's realistic to their own reality. Not everyone celebrates Christmas, and some celebrate other holidays too in its place. So by doing this, the writers are making this world feel more lived in and fleshed out by not having everyone celebrate the same holiday. It feels more tangible to have each pony civilization celebrate something different, and it adds to their culture significantly. You feel invested and learn what these different cultures are. The special shows them off in creative ways, yet it still has a singular connective tissue that links them all together. This was something that LP staff did in FIM Season 8 with the Young Citizens Traditions in the Heartwarming Club, and I love reprisal of this theme here. The different holiday traditions feel alive. You get to actually experience the festivities yourself instead of just hearing about it. What this setup era of Make Your Mark succeeded at was not an explicit world building, but implicit world building, which is a valid concept. Heck, Debulium 2 once again came in to corroborate this, and their explanation for it is really good. I 100% agree here. When the main 5 travel to the 3 civilizations, we're given time to experience just how exactly they celebrate their respective holidays. This allows for greater depth. Customs are crucial to understanding how exactly a world or location within that world operates. And like I said, each one of these holidays are unique enough and tell you something about the pony races. The Earth ponies celebrate in a down-to-earth manner, similar to our world with Christmas, whereas the Pegasi like to celebrate their histories through extravagant musicals, and the Unicorns are very tribal and superstitious. They celebrate by having rituals and sharing poetry. A big criticism Make Your Mark got in its early stages was the lack of world building, but I think what most people missed was that this is world building. By having your locations be socially and culturally distinct, you are adding to that world you created and fleshing it out. This allows the audience to fill in the blanks and feel like they're living in that world. Bridalwood, Zephyr Heights, and Maritime Bay already felt different and unique from one another right off the bat. The addition of these separate traditions just adds that in a lot of ways. There is criticism for the pacing of the episode, but I thought it was paced perfectly fine, with only a couple minor gaps here and there. We have a very clear sense of beginning, middle, and end, and we never stay too long in one location to the point where it gets boring, and the set piece overstays its welcome. Each one of the places exists to serve the story and to tell something about the world or the cultural traditions, which I found to be a smart subversion of the usual pony festival trope. This time the festival plot feels like it's adding something to the world our characters inhabit, rather than just being there because it's obligatory for LP. People also say that Sunny's way too pushing this episode and that she rushes every pony, in which, yeah, she does, but it's actually for a very powerful reason that both this and Tired Tale seem to highlight. Sunny seems to struggle with abandonment issues, which adds further to her character. I know we're not talking about Tyler's Hill yet, and we will eventually, don't worry, but I need to mention Sunny Day dinners in order to help with this analysis. When her friends aren't around, Sunny feels lonely, like she doesn't have anyone to be there for her, and yeah, she doesn't. Her father is dead, so she doesn't have anybody to be there for her when she's alone. That's why she likes to do everything with her friends, because it makes her feel like she's part of a family. It stands to reason that Sunny has a greater appreciation for her friends because they're the only pony she has in her life. The reason why she's so quick to say, we can do all our holiday traditions together, is because she doesn't want them leaving her. All her friends have their own commitments as we see here, so they would have to leave her in order to fulfill them. Sunny is terrified of this, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a future Toy Tale episode where that fear of abandonment is confronted. She's a very vulnerable character, and her constant enthusiasm is her way of masking her deep-seated insecurities. Believe me, I would know. I'm so lonely, why don't I have any friends? It's very easy to read between the lines and see the subtext going on with Sunny. She obviously spent many years being alone, and now she finally has friends who will spend time with her and care about her. She doesn't want to be apart from them, and it's quick to believe that they're growing apart when stuff like this happens. That's honestly quite sad. I'm not going to say she was executed the best. I mean, the scene where her friends confront her for rushing them would have been nice so we can see her reveal this to them. Would have strengthened their bond further, but you know what? I'm not too mad about it considering there was a literal ticking clock to get back to the Bride House in order to see the wishing star. I don't know, I think having a conflict over Sunny's pushiness would have wasted time that the special absolutely did not have. Plus, her attitude does lead to a nice message at the end about spending holidays with your friends. It's not the best portrayal, but not a bad one by any means. Heck, if you read between the lines, you can get a lot out of her portrayal here, so I think it does even out. Once again, the songs are insanely memorable, and over half of them are not generic pop, so again, this show has variety to its music. My favorite song has to be Joyous Wishin' Time, which is part of that big musical that Zip and Pip sang. Just the music, the lighting, and how everything is framed is just a masterclass in editing. I also find a twist at the end very intriguing. An ancient unicorn snow spell, What does help is that the twist does not come out of nowhere. It's actually neatly foreshadowed throughout the episode whenever any unicorn says Frosty shivers. There's actual setup for the resolution in the background, and that's something to be commended. It's not a contrived resolution by any means, so that earns a special major bonus points in my book. Overall, I think this special was a major step up from Chapter 1, and it really shows how Make Your Mark got better with each installment. Even when the episodes aren't plot related, they still find a way to make it significant and genuinely entertaining. Above all else, Winter Wish Day is a good time, and I can see why it's many people's favorites. The first 3 chapters of Make Your Mark were fantastic, and helped establish this series to be what it was. There was great character writing for everyone, and tackled heartfelt themes and showed more complex dynamics. The first special certainly hasn't aged all that well and suffers from early installment weirdness, but the remaining 2 chapters really work. You've already heard me describe everything there is to love, while also debunking some important critiques thrown in its way, so I won't reiterate any of that here. I just hope that I was able to help you see what makes this show stand out so much, and why it deserves more love and attention than it currently gets. The episodes tell great lessons and showcase the main 5 in relatable scenarios that teach them something. These chapters help me pursue writing for G5, and they're the very reason why I even have this channel to begin with. Make Your Mark is the perfect example as to how LMP should be done, and we honestly need more like it. As a sequel, this show manages to respect its predecessor and the impact it left, while as its own thing, it carves out a new path and tells a new kind of story. Is it 100% perfect? No. But is what we have here enough for me to call an overhated masterpiece? Absolutely yes. This show deserves so much more than the vitriol it got, and it will undoubtedly stand the test of time as a success. Thank you all so much for making it to the end. This video has been in the works for 9 months, and it's finally seeing the light of day. Sorry if I didn't have as much to say about chapters 1 and 3. I guess you can see this as a primarily chapter 2 good video, and that's how it stayed. The other pieces just kind of fell into place later on in the process. This chapter in particular really means a lot to me, and it's what kickstarted the Misty saga, so it only stood the reason that I devote the whole hour to it. But with that being said, I'd love to see your thoughts. Do you agree with my assessment on the first 3 chapters of Make Your Mark or not? Was there anything I missed? And do you think this show deserved better treatment by the fandom? There really is only one answer to that. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Until next time, this is Nightwing signing out. Hoof to heart.